We are going to provide an update on what the Harmony Alliance has been doing, but mostly what we want is a really interactive session and to hear from all of you. So throughout the session, please, we'll try to keep our speaking to minimum. We would really like to have discussion and conversation. So please keep sending through your questions. You can type directly in the chat box or use the Q&A feature to send questions to all three of us. Maria will start the briefing and then Gulnara and I will join in later. So I'll hand over to Maria Dimopoulos, the chair of Harmony Alliance, to start the update.
Sana, thanks so much for that. I do want to start by acknowledging the country. Of course, I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land and to all elders, past, present and emerging, and any who may, of course, be joining us. I also want to acknowledge, of course, that sovereignty has never been ceded in this country, and we've yet to sign a treaty with the First Nations people. We're all around the country, of course, so I also want to acknowledge, respectfully acknowledge that I live and work in the land of the Boonwurrung country. And I also want to say that I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Reconciliation Action Plan, but it is of great source of inspiration to me and colleagues and council members, of course, that in acknowledgement, we want to do a lot more than just engage with rhetoric. So we are reflecting quite deeply on what our obligations are as migrant refugee women across the country. We want to move into what I know Mary O'Dowd describes as respectfully acknowledging country in practice. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. What a wonderful opportunity to share with you the work of the Harmony Alliance. It's been a big year, and as Sana said, both she and Gulnara are going to share some more of the detail around the achievements. But what an extraordinary time to be living in with COVID-19 and the global pandemic. Migrant refugee women, of course, have been impacted in a multitude of ways. And in our view, it's the amplification rather than the creation of many of these inequities. They've really come to the fore. We've done quite a bit, of course, around things like the impact on temporary visa holders, family violence issues, impact in relation to poverty, and so on. But we also want to take the opportunity to celebrate our successes. We have stood in partnership and in solidarity with many of our National Alliance sisters and others, and we're going to hear a lot more about that. And ultimately, I think as we move into the future or the recovery phase of all of this stuff at the moment, we really want to build on the strengths of those contributions to really grow as an organisation and reflect back the sorts of issues that our membership think is important, because of course without our members, really the organisation becomes little more than just a symbolic sort of front. It's our grassroots memberships, it's the dialogues that each of you are having around the country. They're the things that really inform us in terms of ways forward. The organisations that are part of our structure as well, and there are many, our friends, our allies and so on. We're going to hear a lot more about it in the next hour and a half. But if I could just break down the structure of the day, I'm going to provide briefly for our new members who perhaps have only just joined us this year, a quick overview of Harmony and its key objectives and priority areas. And then I'm going to focus particularly on two areas that inspire me. At the launch, of course, of our Reconciliation Action Plan, and one of the key actions under that plan was the recent webinar. And I know we had a lot of people around the country joining us in that, but I want to reflect on what some of those key points that were raised during that discussion and how we might move those forward and progress the conversations, so many that we've started already. I also want to reflect on my experience of having attended a recent, well, it's not that recent anymore, it feels like it's pretty recent, but having had the privilege of attending the Beijing Plus 25 review in Bangkok. I'm then going to ask our two wonderful secretariats, or members of the Secretariat, Gulnara and Sana, to go into some more detail around some of the partnerships, the recent policy initiatives, a whole host of things. We do want time for questions, folks, so hang in there with us, because there will be scope to have a dialogue or a conversation or ask any questions that you might. Facilitating virtually, I used to think that I was a fairly reasonable facilitator until I had to do it virtually. It is a challenge when you can't see people, you can't pick up on the non-verbal nuances. So bear with me. If you could use the chat function, as Sana pointed out, to send through your questions. In that way, I can make sure that I canvass as many of the comments and queries that are being put forward. If there are some that we don't get time to cover, rest assured that we'll be following up with you and making every effort to share any information that you might be seeking out. Our hope is obviously to continue growing, as I said, and to continue to inform and provide that important platform for ongoing dialogue and discussion between all of our members. Sana, is there anything you think I've forgotten in terms of the structure? Look, let me start with the Harmony Alliance. I have to say, it always gives me a little bit of a sort of heartbeat, a fastening of the heartbeat, when I reflect on just how much we have done, how much our membership has contributed to these achievements. For our new members who might not know, the Harmony Alliance is one of 6 women's alliances. Full title, Harmony Alliance, Migrant and Refugee Women for Change. And I think that emphasis on change for me is becoming increasingly significant. We are about social change. We are about enabling the voices of diverse migrant and refugee women and their communities. We are about actually ensuring that we are affecting institutions in terms of their agendas, policy development, and so on. And we keep talking about this strength-based approach. And I think that's based on a view that there is a heck of a lot of wisdom, knowledge, and insight that is out there that can contribute significantly to the way in which we, as a nation, as a country, as different states and territories, are able to shape the priority setting of our governments, of mainstream organisations, of systems as a whole. I'm not going to say too much more, except to invite you, perhaps, if you haven't already, to have a look at our website. There's a lot of publications that are on there, updates, shared policy papers, submissions that we've done. You'll find that it takes you a good year to get through all of that material, because it certainly takes me a lot of time to do it. In terms of our objectives and our priorities, of course, since the very inception of the Alliance, which was, in my view, directly informed by the sorts of needs that were being identified in the communities out there, in migrant refugee women's organisations, who spoke about some of those priority areas that we've now captured as part of our business priorities, as part of our work plans, something that we like to actualise on a daily basis. Key ones being access to justice. And again, I'll invite the Secretariat to talk in more detail around those, but submissions to, say, the family law inquiry, building on the work that's been done in the development of interpretive frameworks, building on the work of the framework for our National Judicial Council in terms of the access to justice for migrant and refugee women more generally. Women's health and wellbeing being another critical priority area, and again, no doubt Gulnara will fill us in further on some of those details. Safety being a critical point, and now more than ever, I know that we're seeing a tragic increase in both the numbers of disclosures around the country of family and domestic violence. Sadly, murder more recently of an international student, demonstrating just how significant those inequities in terms of access to services, of the need to really think about the extent to which digital platforms are or are not accessible to many migrant refugee women across the country. And another conversation that I think we'll continue to have beyond COVID-19 is the need to diversify referral pathways for migrant and refugee women. It's, I think we're asking some really important questions. We keep saying that whilst COVID-19 has certainly given rise to some unique issues, at the same time, it's served to amplify structural inequities that we know have been there for far, far too long and need to be addressed. Of course, domestic and international policy development, engagement, communication, coalition building, and so on are many of the other priority areas and activities that we're undertaking, and we're going to get our Secretariat to talk more about that. Can I start by maybe giving you a little bit more detail on two key areas that I know are areas of priority for certainly the Harmony Alliance, but for many of us as members out there. The first, of course, is this wonderful document. I'm hoping everybody can see it, possibly not. Our Reconciliation Action Plan, which of course was launched, Sana, in October of last year at the Melbourne Town Hall. We were fortunate enough to have some key opening speeches by both Christine Ross, who is the National Chair of our sister organisation, NATSIWA, or the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Association, and Tanya Hosh, a Torres Strait Islander woman who's the AFL Manager of Inclusion, both of whom started by really commending the importance or highlighting the importance of addressing what many of us described as unfinished business. Unfinished business between migrant and refugee women across the nation and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and their communities. The need to recognise the importance of truth-telling, the importance of reflecting on the history of this country and being able to sit with very uncomfortable truths about the history of trauma, of dispossession, and the ongoing colonisation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in this country. Important questions that we continue to put in our recent webinar as well, and hopefully many of you had the opportunity to join us around the country. Opening speech by Dr. Jackie Huggins AM, who talked about how far had reconciliation actually developed in Australia, some questions that we put to her about whether indeed the roadmap to reconciliation had been progressed or not. And then more specifically sought out her views on what a good ally would look like if we were to stand in solidarity with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sisters and brothers. Christine Ross also joined us again, and I think the beauty of that was to really demonstrate that our relationship with our sister organisation, NATSIWA, the other one of 6 alliances, as I keep saying, because of course the development of the RAP needed to be something that reflected the sort of priority areas that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women were telling us as well. So that partnership has become a very firm centrepiece of any activities that we undertake. Now, many of you would know that the RAP and the various activities we've undertaken under the action items is stage 1. There are 5 dimensions of reconciliation as set out by Reconciliation Australia, the first being very much the RAP. And Christine in the webinar reminded us that in terms of the first part of that dimension, it was about defining success in terms of historical acceptance, that we understood that we took the opportunity to inform ourselves of the past and the impact of the wrongs and the degree to which it's incumbent on us as non-Indigenous Australians to make amends, but to demonstrate allyship in ways that move past rhetoric, that moved past mere symbolism to actually looked at day-to-day reconciliation. So Christine Ross joined us in the webinar to talk about the importance of our ongoing partnership with NATSIWA. We also then had our two wonderful members and council representatives, Maria Osman, and I don't know, Maria, if at some point you want to share some reflections, and of course our good friend and inaugural award winner, Nyadol, who also talked about what does it mean for us as migrant refugee women coming to a land that has no treaty, coming to a country that doesn't significantly recognise the traumas of the past, and coming to a country where treaty processes with First Nations people has yet to happen. I think some key points, if I can say, was the reflection on whether the Uluru Statement and the calls from many Indigenous leaders across the country to really look at what the acceptance of Uluru Statement might look like, a vindication perhaps of the truth of the story and the beginning of true justice for First Nations people. The other points, as I said, is being an ally. And Sana, I know that you and Gulnara were in attendance, but some key points that I took down was that both Maria and Nyadol and other comments that were being made while people joined us was being a genuine ally, I'll quote, involves self-reflection, it involves deep listening. It means knowing that we're coming into this space from a position of power and privilege. Other points is recognising that being an ally isn't a one-day identity, it's a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency and accountability with marginalised individuals and groups of people. Lots to do, but I am aware that the quote that I think Christine might have made in reference to Lowitja O'Donoghue, who once said, "We must accept the truth of our history. It is the truth that will set us free." I could go on and on. What is exciting is that we intend to build on some of those activities around the RAP, continue our relationship with NATSIWA, continue the conversations of that unfinished business, and of course look towards other ways in which we can also host further webinars, conversations, and so on. The other part of I think, a pretty exciting development is the emphasis that we've had in relation to the work around our international engagement. I mentioned to you that I had the honour and privilege of being part of the Australian government delegation to the Beijing Plus 25 intergovernmental meeting as part of the civil society representative. Certainly happy to provide a report, and there is the Australian government report, of course, that is also on our website. But some key insights I think that I developed there was the degree to which the dynamics around negotiation are so influenced by context. I think a number of us as civil society representatives attended that session armed with language that was meaningful and relevant to an Australian context. Concepts like migrant, refugee, migration and settlement, when translated into that global context, they often felt short in terms of how we tried to get some of the key issues impacting on migrant refugee communities in this country. So a lesson that certainly good friends like Juliana and myself and others took away was the need to build longer term capability and capacity into what we think is an untapped potential, our diaspora in Australia. The diaspora, of course, has such a vast degree of knowledge and insights around how best to make those linkages across the nations, how to draw on the strengths of particular programs and conversations that are happening between us and our global sisters. The need, I think, to build on some of those strengths then resulted in us giving some further strategic thought to how might we build longer term capacity to our own membership, so that come opportunities like the Commission for Status of Women or other international platforms, how can we be better prepared, be able to use the language of the United Nations and other instrumentalities, be more aware of human rights discourse, so that indeed the very real and valid points that we needed to make about disadvantage, about the erosion of some of our rights, about the impact of family violence and temporary visa arrangements on the women and children in our communities, how we could better convey those kinds of human rights issues in a global context. That, of course, led to the hosting of a webinar where Esther from the Office for Women so kindly was able to share with us a bit of background on what those instrumentalities look like and why international engagement for our civil society is so important. Carol Shaw, who was also in attendance at Beijing Plus 25, was someone who totally blew my mind, can I say. I don't know if Carol's online, but my goodness, her knowledge and insights as well in terms of how those international sort of mechanisms can be best utilised to progress our agendas, was someone who shared with us some key strategies and ways in which we could do that. We intend to build on some of those. Again, I think there are so much opportunities, or so many opportunities out there for us to give greater consideration. I would really like to sort of look at how we as human rights defenders are also being impacted by the current environment. Certainly the way in which we might be responding to the current crisis, whether it's that failure to recognise deaths in custody in our own backyard, as I think Lydia Thorpe said yesterday in a speech that I heard on her webinar, or whether it's actually about reaching out to the global agenda around anti-racism and intersectionalities and how we might build mass sort of coalitions between us to ensure that we are addressing those systemic roots of the sort of injustice that we're seeing being played out in our own country, but of course in the United States right now. I also want to sort of end by saying that it's the dedication, I think, the passion and the commitment to mobilise despite adversity, the extraordinary strength of so many of our members and beyond to be willing and courageous to speak up or to work around strategies that do ensure that we're constantly, visibilising, if that's a way of describing this, to ensuring that our issues don't fall off the agenda, because one of the areas I know of great concern for many sister organisations across the country, and indeed in the conversations I'm having with like-type organisations like the Southall Sisters in the UK or the Pacific Asian Women in the United States, many who have felt that the COVID-19 pandemic has served to further silence their experiences, or has meant that their issues have been relegated conveniently to a lower status on the agenda. The work that's going on, I think, to insist that our issues are not reduced further, that we are constantly being made visible, that our voices are being heard, and that we are engaging at a grassroots level as much as we are at a policy level around these issues. I'll make some final comments towards the end of this conversation, of course, but can I hand it over to you, Gulnara, to talk maybe more specifically about some of the work that we're doing in that policy space, in the research space, in the partnership space. Gulnara.
Yes, thanks, Maria, and well, hello, everyone. I would really like to join Maria in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all respectively meeting today. For us, for Sana and myself here in Canberra, these are of course Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. And for those of you who may not know me, my name is Gulnara Abbasova. I'm the Executive Officer of the Harmony Alliance. And well, this is a very different membership forum. About was it a year ago, but this time last year, I think, we all came together in Brisbane, and the year before, I think it was Melbourne, Maria, wasn't it? And we were planning, of course, to meet in Sydney this year when this global pandemic changed life as we knew it. So while we have not been able to connect through various events and forums as we normally would, in some sense, I feel that we had rarely stood together stronger than now. And I would really like to extend our sincere gratitude to all of the members for your commitment to this work and for ensuring that migrant and refugee women's voices are part of the critical national conversations. As I say, you are really the alliance. You know, you are the most important part of this body. And today I would really like us to reflect on the growth, because I think it's something you do as you reach some milestones. As we're approaching the 3rd year of our existence, it's really nice to reflect on our growth, and not just over the last year, but say over the last 3 years since the inception. And we have certainly grown in size. I saw there was a question from Maria Osman earlier about the number of members, and we now have 78 organizational members and 54 individual members across Australia. And it's really the strong membership base that makes our work more informed and more connected. We have also grown in terms of the depth and the scope of the work that we do, as Maria briefly touched upon. We're working on a robust policy agenda across the priority areas that Maria discussed earlier: the migrant and refugee women's health, the safety issues, the access to justice, the economic participation, the international work, and of course the emergency response and recovery, very relevant issues of our time. And Sana will be discussing some of the particular highlights of our policy work shortly. But I'd just like to flag that in some of the recent developments, in addition to the core work that we do in partnership with the Office for Women, we have commenced working on 2 significant programs. First, the development of the Dowry Abuse Prevention Framework under the 4th Action Plan of the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Children. And this work is undertaken in collaboration with the Australasian Centre for Human Rights and Health. And I think I saw Manjula's name on the list. Yes, she's here. And that's with the support from the Department of Social Services. We have also commenced working on a national program to improve health literacy of migrant and refugee women under the National Women's Health Policy. And this is also a collaboration with the Australian College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and that is supported by the Department of Health. And look, I really think that the capacity of the Alliance to undertake substantive work on the major programs such as the Office for Women's or the National Women's Health or the 4th Action Plan, it is really an achievement that we should all be proud of. And look, to boost both our strategic and our policy capability was very much the plan behind some of the structural changes that were made to the Alliance about a year ago. We have slightly changed the composition of the Secretariat and how we work. The Secretariat now comprises myself as the Executive Officer, providing strategic and executive oversight. We have Sana Ashraf, who is also on this webinar, who manages the Secretariat work and our policy response. We have recently been joined by Amanda Lee, who is managing the dowry abuse and the health literacy projects that I just mentioned, and we're supported by an admin support colleague, of course. And that's exciting. It's exciting to have a team who is working towards some fantastic objectives in improving outcomes for migrant and refugee women across Australia. I would really also like to reflect on another critical contributor to our work and to our progress. Certainly, as I see it, it's our collaborations. And some of them are long-standing and have only been reinforced over the last year, such as with the 5 other alliances, our sister alliances. And it's really in the spirit of sisterhood that we work together on the cross-cutting issues of domestic and international policy. I think at least one of the representatives of the alliances is on the call. I can see Sharon Page's name. Hello, Sharon. We have really enjoyed the positive relationship and partnership with the Office for Women at the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I'm not sure if there are any representatives here, but if they are, we're really grateful for the ongoing support from our Office for Women colleagues and for their commitment to gender equality and the full participation of women in all their diversity in the social, economic and cultural life. We're really fortunate to partner with community organizations and industry bodies in the development of our programs. We're really excited to be advancing our first academic partnership with Monash University across a number of projects. Sana might touch upon that later, but certainly we will be partnering with Monash to improve our flagship survey of migrant and refugee women's voices to make it more robust and give us more better evidence base to continue our policy work. And certainly reflecting back on this year, which certainly has been in some ways really challenging, but despite all of the challenges, I feel that we continue to fulfill the Alliance's mission, which is to bring migrant and refugee women's voices to the center of policy and practice. And we're very excited about the years ahead. Thank you for standing with us in this journey. None of this would have been possible with our amazing chair. Maria, your leadership has been transformational, and our outstanding council. I can see that some members are here today, and that's fantastic. Thank you all for your wisdom and guidance. I don't want to take too much time, and before I hand over to Sana, I would really like to thank Sana, who's been doing an outstanding job in facilitating the work of the Alliance. I'm indeed quite fortunate to be supported by such a fantastic professional, and Sana, you bring not only expertise and skill to your work, but also passion, and that makes all the difference to what we achieve. So yes, Maria, if that's okay with you, I might hand over to Sana to just touch upon some of the policy pieces.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Gulnara and Maria, both of you. Amazing recap of everything that we have done, and also like I find myself really lucky to have been working with Harmony Alliance under the mentorship of Maria, Gulnara, and the council members and all the people that I interact with. It has been a year of great learning and great leaps for me, myself personally, in personal development and all of that. I will, so there are quite a few things that have been covered by Maria and Gulnara. I'll just talk about more details of the projects that we have been engaged in. And first off, it's the women's safety that has been really a key priority for us for a very long time, and also has become more of an urgent issue as well over the past few months. It has always been a really urgent and important issue, but it is becoming more severe in its form, and requires a better, more coordinated response. So on the women's safety front, we have had continued advocacy with the Office for Women directly, and with some of the other departments within the government regarding the issue of women on temporary visas and their access to social security and benefits and payments and safe housing, income support, all of those things, which are the systemic barriers in their ability to access safety when they need it for themselves and for their children to be able to escape violent partners, or also not necessarily escape or break their relationships in every case, but also to seek safety within their own homes and also stay within their communities and have that support and safety available to them. So that is really our key priority. And on that same sort of topic, we have also been working on developing some more research strengths and research collaboration. So Gulnara mentioned our work with Monash University. We have two projects in the pipeline. One of them is the Harmony Alliance survey that was initially done in 2018. That was a preliminary survey to get an idea of the major issues that affect migrant and refugee women. And of course, women's safety came out as one of the key issues. And we are really trying to focus on women's safety in our next survey, which we are partnering with Monash University, and using their robust and more rigorous research technologies and research expertise in combination with our networks and our approach to the people on the ground. So to make it a really comprehensive and robust ongoing evidence base for policy work, for highlighting, for education and awareness. So this piece of evidence and research will be really key in our work going forward. We aim to have the survey live sometime in the next few months and have the survey report released by the end of this year, 2020. Given how this year has been going, we'll be really happy when this finally comes together. But yes, that is one thing we're really working on in collaboration with Monash. And then there is the ARC linkage project that we have applied for with Monash and some of the other community organizations. And Aveva is also a national women's alliance, our sister alliance. We work very closely with them on a lot of issues affecting women's safety, especially migrant and refugee women's safety and violence against women. So with Aveva, In Touch Multicultural Center for Women's Safety in Melbourne, they're also our members and also on the council. And Monash, together with these organizations, we are developing a project to further the research and awareness on the issue of women on temporary visas facing violence and their ability to access the family violence provisions. So in the current migration regulations, there are some provisions for women experiencing violence to be able to continue to stay in Australia, even if their relationship breaks down and when they're facing or experiencing violence, but they are quite restrictive. There are a lot of evidentiary requirements that women in these situations are often not able to meet. These provisions are not being used by enough women. They're not accessible to every woman experiencing violence. And most women on temporary visas are not even eligible for these provisions. So that is something that is really, it requires a lot of technical legal understanding and also a lot of understanding of the lived experience of women experiencing violence. So we will be working on that. We are potentially also developing another project in collaboration with Monash, which is again pending the funding decisions and all of that. That is also on the issue of temporary visas, but with a focus on children's safety in families and relationships, and how family laws and international sort of movement of people affects children in those situations. So when, for example, a parent has to leave the country, what happens with the children? Apart from that, something that is very, very relevant to the issue of women's safety is women's ability to participate economically and have financial independence. So economic participation and financial literacy and financial independence has been another key priority, not only because it's related to the issue of violence, but also on its own as a key strategy for women's empowerment and leadership and enhancing, making sure that the voices of migrant and refugee women are heard. So we had quite a few different projects under this priority area over the past few years, but over the last year, we brought them all together and created a more coherent approach to enhancing women's participation in economic life and enhancing their financial literacy and all of that, by developing a project or an umbrella project called Harmony Empowers, which was launched last year in November with the launch of the leadership and professional development webinars. So these are the webinars we have been recording with women who are role models in that space, who can share their success stories, but also who have faced similar challenges as most migrant and refugee women in this country face, and they can share their journeys They can share how they overcame those challenges, what are the challenges they still face. So providing that real relatable advice to women on the issues of professional development and leadership. We also provided scholarships to two of our individual members to attend a national level leadership program in Canberra under the Harmony Empowers project. And then the third aspect is the financial literacy, which is again work in progress, and we are developing certain modules to enhance the economic empowerment and financial literacy of migrant and refugee women. And the third major part of work that I would really like to highlight is the intersectionality framework that we have been working on. And that really cuts across all of our priority areas and issues, whether it's women's safety, whether it's economic empowerment, any area of life. We really need an understanding of intersectionality and practice of intersectionality in policy responses, in frontline practitioners' responses, so really across the board. So that is something we have been working on in collaboration with the council, with the advisory groups that we have, and the structure of the alliance and the membership. So we shared the discussion paper with the whole membership of the alliance a few months ago, and based on the responses we received, and really thanking everyone who sent in their responses and stories, like really personal stories and case studies that helped us craft a really comprehensive sort of intersectionality framework, which is we're still consulting with external stakeholders at this stage. So we did a lot of consultation internally with the alliance, and now we have a draft framework, and now we're consulting with the external stakeholders, and hopefully we'll be able to finalize that soon and have it recognized by the government departments that we work closely with, and also non-government organizations, the mainstream organizations that we work with, to really make the intersectional issues experienced by migrant and refugee women specifically in this country known and understood in the sector. I think that's pretty much it from my side. There is a lot that I could keep going on about, but we really want to have a discussion and take your ideas, concerns, thoughts on board and see how we can improve going forward. And yeah, I'll hand over to you, Maria, and then we'll go to the audience.
Yep. Thanks so much, Sana. And I think we all agree that we've had a very, very busy time. We also want to address where the gaps are and where our members think we need to either identify as priority areas going into the future, or where we can strengthen perhaps some of our current responses. So at this stage, as Sana and Gulnara, thank you to both of you for filling in those details. But as you both said, we really want now the opportunity for an interactive session with all of you. By all means, use the chat session, although I noticed there's only been a couple of questions about membership. And I might sort of really encourage you to ask any clarifying questions perhaps about any of the work that's been outlined, or alternatively, as I said, any sort of conversation that you want to open up about where to next, where might our priorities be. But can I start with some of the questions? The question of membership and the distinction, and this might be from people who are perhaps a little new, or some who are saying, look, do we need to do more around our individual memberships? I mean, we've got a vast number of organisational membership, in fact 78 organisations, if we brought them all in the room, and their outreach would amount to thousands across the country. But our individual membership, Sana or Gulnara, in terms of your thinking around that, I know we've had several conversations, what might that look like if we were to work with our membership, our current membership, to really build on that individual category of membership? Any thoughts?
Yeah, look, Maria, I might just share some thoughts on that. And look, when we were in the process of establishing the alliance and sort of looking at the categories of membership, and we did a bit of consultation, a fair bit of consultation with the community at that point. Look, I think our focus and our I suppose, objective is really to reach as many migrant and refugee women as we can through the organizational members. I mean, most of the, if not all of our 78 organizational members are membership bodies in their own right. So our objective is, of course, to utilize those established, trusted avenues to make sure that we reach out to migrant and refugee women. However, as part of the consultation process, what came out strongly, and we recognize that, of course, is that there are some women who are not connected with any community organizations, who are not members or who are not engaged with any organizations as such. And of course, then there are some organizations who cannot be our members, such as academic institutions. So to ensure that those women who are not connected with any established or community-based organizations, as well as women in academia, for example, who make a significant contribution to our knowledge and knowledge base around issues of migration and settlement and gender. So to make sure that those women are able to be connected into the alliance, we introduced the individual member category. And I certainly think that we could grow both, of course. I think it's about growing our membership in a meaningful way. So we make sure that we engage with our members in a productive, in a connected way. But we certainly think it would be one of our objectives to continue growing our membership base. Just keeping in mind that, you know, we do want to reach out to as many women as we can through the organizations in the first place, and ensure that we have that avenue for those who cannot be connected.
Yeah. And I know one of the sort of ongoing questions that we've had too is, what does representation look like? How might we, as you said, ensure that those women who often feel excluded by the way in which systems or organisations operate, how can we, as part of that deep self-scrutiny, ensure true inclusion? So part of that is also creating different spaces, and I think the way in which our Young Women's Advisory Group, for example, has really kind of been part of that decision-making process in terms of informing our priority setting agendas, looking at that mentoring program, for want of a better word, but again, we're sort of deconstructing that idea of mentorship as being somehow a transfer of knowledge rather than an interactive process of mutual learning for both parties. So I think that's happening, but I think we'd all agree we could certainly have a lot more conversations around inclusion, representation, diversity of perspectives, and identifying what is it that structurally prevents or doesn't enable or empower women from diverse backgrounds to come together or talk further. Yeah. Sana, were you about to say something too, and I'll possibly cut you
I'll
off?
just add something briefly, because I have had individual women approach to me and thinking that they cannot become members because they, in their individual capacities, are not doing groundbreaking work, or they think they're not doing groundbreaking work. So there are a lot of misconceptions about the ability of individual members to contribute as well. And I have been engaging with those people and telling them about the opportunities, and also that their perspective is as valuable as any other person's perspective is valuable, who is associated with organizations to join. So I would suggest that all the members who are on here today, and whoever will listen to this webinar after we put it online, because it's being recorded, when somebody approaches you about the Harmony Alliance membership, or if there is someone who you think would be a valuable asset to the Alliance, to encourage them to apply for the membership, and regardless of what their status as an individual member is, as long as they identify as a migrant or refugee woman and have some interest in migrant and refugee women's issues in this country, we are open to taking applications.
Great. Thank you. I'm just looking at some of the questions there that are coming up. Do you have some of those in front of you, Sana? I can't see them myself. Maybe can you? I can't access them, but apparently there's about 5, I'm being told. Yeah.
So there is a question from an anonymous attendee. Reflecting on the past 3 years, what are some areas which the Harmony Alliance thinks it could have improved on?
That it could have improved on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I maybe start the conversation and then invite you and obviously others, because perceptions of what's worked and what hasn't can often vary. I think we could always do a lot more around the First Nations work. And I think what the recent discussion through the webinar has highlighted is that question of solidarity and allyship. And I think it was Jackie Huggins in her presentation that might have said to us, you can't just go around calling yourself an ally until First Nations people tell you you are. And that, I think, to me said that whilst the work is ours, whilst the obligation to do that self-discovery around how is ongoing settlement of this country directly contributing to colonisation of First Nations people where there is no treaty, that apart from that, the need to kind of step in and support, to really more actively listen to what it is, the demands that are being made of First Nations people in our communities, and particularly women. So I would like to think that we've started conversations with not only NATSIWA but other agencies across the country, certainly in terms of family violence, and stepping up and doing some further work about making the agenda for Aboriginal women more visible. I think the deaths in custody and the call from Christine Ross to really identify that it's Aboriginal women who also constitute such a significant proportion of incarcerated women. I think that seeking out of greater alliance with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, for me, has been identified not so much as a gap, because I think that's almost a given historically, but more about this is a place where we could be doing more internal dialogue and a lot more reaching out and asking, doing the deep listening. What is it that you need from us in terms of allyship and solidarity? I don't know what either of you two think, but that's certainly been something big for me. And the other area I would say, again, is the international engagement, is coming back and recognising that there is so much scope and opportunity to build global discourse, global sisterhood with organisations. The North-South dialogue and opportunities like that are really exciting for us to learn more and to share more across the globe. Sana or Gulnara?
Yeah, look, and thanks for that question. It's quite it's an interesting, of course, question to reflect on. What could we improve on? And considering, that we are reflecting on this pretty much on a daily basis, there are lots of things I can probably discuss with you today. But look, a couple of things that really stand out to me, and something that I certainly would like us to do more of, in addition to the points that Maria raised, and I absolutely agree with her. I think international work has been very much something that we've been hoping to prioritize for a while. But if I add to that, look, I would really like us to develop more of cross-sector partnerships than at this point. I think working in collaborations across sectors can be incredibly effective in achieving positive change in other sectors, and in space where it is really necessary for migrant and refugee women. And I'm really looking at issues of health and justice, and those really the economic participation. So those very key priorities, but how we can do that more through those cross-sector industry partnerships is something that I sort of will keep reflecting on, and will certainly do more of. And we've started some already, but I would just really like to see us grow some of that engagement. So we step out of the sector a bit more and try to engage with those critical areas where the change needs to happen. I would also really like us to boost our research agenda, of course, and some of the thinking behind establishing those sort of the academic partnership with the Monash University was exactly for that reason, because ultimately we are a national body. We're doing national sort of policy, contribute to national policy work. We were informed by our membership and our community connections and the grassroots voices, but we would also like to make sure that we grow our research capability to boost that evidence base. And that's something that I think we will be doing more and more of in the next few years. Sana, did you want to add some critical reflections to that?
No, I think I'm happy with that. I was going to say the research agenda point, but that is again something we are actively thinking and working on. It's definitely something to improve on, but it's on our radar.
Are we able to ask any of our participants? This is where I'm completely technologically inept. I noticed some excellent comments from Maria Osman and a few other members. Is there an opportunity to do that, or it doesn't quite work that way?
We can allow people to speak, but I think we still have some outstanding questions, so I would answer those questions first before.
Sure. Quite a few comments and questions. Yes, Maria, we're just mindful of making sure we get through those.
Sure. Yep.
So I'll just continue reading out the questions.
Sure. Yep.
It's a question from Vanessa Song. What can we do in our own communities and states to help organize for the work that Harmony Alliance does? What can we do to get involved in the work that Harmony Alliance does?
Again, can I ask our Secretariat to answer that? My response would be, come on board. We really are keen to engage as many people out there as possible who are aligned, obviously, with our aims, objectives, and worldviews.
Look, very briefly, and I'll probably ask Sana to talk a bit more about it. But look, in pre-COVID world, we of course tried to have as many events in across states and territories as we could, to host different launches or gatherings or get-togethers to ensure that we have some face-to-face engagement with membership base. It's slightly different this year, of course, so we don't have that face-to-face capacity, but we have been maintaining this sort of virtual connection. And beyond that, look, we try and sort of flag the work that we're doing through our newsletters, for example. So, you would be able to see in our newsletter saying things along the lines of, this month we're working on a particular inquiry or submission or a particular case. Please contact us to discuss what are some of the key issues. So we constantly we try to proactively reach out to members to indicate what it is we're working on, and whether it might be of interest to some or to all members, and seek input on our active work, ongoing work. So these are some of the ways we do it. We of course also have one of our flagship projects is the survey, and this is where we really rely on the membership to help us get it to as many women as possible, because this is ultimately what we draw on in our policy and advocacy. And if our members can help us circulate the surveys through their own membership in jurisdictions, that would be amazing. We're very open to suggestions on future work and what we should be doing on an ongoing basis. We don't need forums or webinars like this. We take those considerations, we take that input on board on an ongoing basis, and it is quite often that members alert us to certain things that occur. We don't necessarily do a lot of work in states and territories or responding to particular state and territory inquiries unless they contribute to the national picture, of course, just by virtue of maintaining our national focus. but we're really open to suggestions from members. If there's anything that you think that is coming out that we should be looking out for, that we should be contributing to, please do email us.
Yep. I'll just add two things to that. Promote our membership, ask people to join us. The membership forms for organizations and individuals are on our website. You can always direct people to that. And also promote the webinars. Now, I mean, there are really downsides to not being able to hold physical events, but now there are also plus sides, and that is you don't need to travel physically to be a part of the conversation. Anyone from anywhere can join, and we are intentionally keeping our webinars and online discussions in the afternoons to allow the people in Western Australia to be able to participate as well. So, and most of the times, in fact, even today's webinar is open to everyone. We don't make it membership only just because we want to engage people wider than that. And also, anyone could be a potential member. Anyone is who has an interest in the issues we're talking about is welcome. So really promote our online events. We have some more coming up, and you will be hearing about them. There will be a discussion on intersectionality and the intersectionality framework that we will be launching soon. So we really rely on all of you to bring relevant people in, irrelevant people in, and expand the discussion. Just promote everything. Thank you. And I'll just move on to the next question if we don't have anything else to add to this question at this point. Okay. The next question is from Mary Lee, and she's asking, in the next 12 months, what does the Harmony Alliance think will be the top 3 practical or strategic outcomes to achieve?
Maria, would you like to share your thoughts on that, and then we might jump in?
Yeah, I'm telling you, the mantra for me as we move forward will be unmute yourself. Constant muting and unmuting. Although some people might really appreciate that I keep the mute button on. Look, for me, I think that, and I keep going back to this point about some of the essential questions. It's almost like what the COVID-19 stuff has done is really impose on us that opportunity to take stock, to reflect, to really kind of look at how these inequities have been so amplified. And of course, as we keep saying, you know, it's all too comfortable for us to reflect on what's going on in the United States without taking a much, much harder look at our own backyard, to borrow from some of the articles that some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander journalists have been writing about, or writers have been doing. So for me, that question of unfinished business between our organisation, Harmony, and our membership, and the engagement with many of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women that we've been working on, both collectively and individually. I think those sort of essential questions of what does truth-telling look like for us in promoting an anti-colonial sort of colonisation discourse, what does real reconciliation look like, particularly through the lens of First Nations people, and I think that question of righting the wrongs and being the sort of or providing the sort of opportunity where post-pandemic, if you like, God, they're all new, you know, the new language, but post-pandemic we can really lead on some visions. I think I might have circulated this article of Arundhati Roy, an amazing woman in my view, and an incredible visionary herself. But if I've sort of found a quote the other day, historically pandemics, she says, have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next, and we can either choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us, or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and be ready to fight it. And I think that now more than ever, we actually need to be able to imagine a world where we're not going back to the normal of discrimination, of social injustices and so on. But I think a new kind of normal where resistance in an effort to sort of create those moments of solidarity, and whether it be with First Nations people or with groups of women and communities that are really highlighting the way in which an intersectional framework can better help us analyse how those structural inequities impact on the day-to-day lives, whether it's in the case of family violence, of health and well-being. I think they're the sorts of things that I would like us to sort of really continue to build on. It's almost like we've started a really intense conversation around what can sometimes feel conceptual. I'd like to start us seeing more around how do we do this practically and what are the implications for us.
Sana, did you have anything to
add?
add?
Sorry.
Inspirational message, I would say.
I think Maria has covered it all. Do you want to say something in response to something?
Yeah, look, Mary, thanks for that question. It's and look, it's really hard to go after Maria because she, fires us up with this amazing inspirational message. And yeah, look, thinking practically though, and in terms of the next 12 months, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the response to COVID-19 will be the key priority. And I think from our point of view, in a very pragmatic way, ensuring that migrant and refugee women are adequately, appropriately included in the response, whether it's through economic measures or social measures or other any other measures in response of COVID, because it will be the key the key priority going forward to the next 12 or 18 months or so. It will be also quite important for us to get a better sense of what our migration and settlement programs will look like post this situation, and how to make sure that people who are going through a settlement process, women who are settling in Australia now or into the future, are best supported to achieve better outcomes for them, again, socially, economically, and just in terms of their individual capacity to fulfill their potential.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that. Sorry, Maria.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say that we can never really become complacent. And I think that was one of the key messages that the Secretariat, in preparing for today, spent a lot of time talking about. We certainly wanted to celebrate and capture the extraordinary achievements, and we mustn't lose sight of that, I think. But at the same time, there is always that danger of losing our visibility at that national agenda, the danger, I suppose, of lapsing into a bit of a self-insulated place where we're not ever present or ever cognizant of the changing dynamics in which oppression and injustice kind of manifests itself. That's why I think research is an important part of our agenda. I think it's why the way that we frame inquiries, whether it's through consultations, whether it's through interactive discussions, we're constantly wanting to know, what does the landscape look like out there? What is the language that our sisters and brothers out there are using in describing their experiences with systems, with institutions? How might we better work collaboratively and collectively to ensure shared outcomes, to ensure that sort of vision of real social, political, economic equality? So I think that part of the framework for us, I hope, is that ongoing commitment to seeing this as a journey of both internal inquiry, but also asking hard questions of you know, our representatives out there, that concept of social and community accountability has to be part and parcel. And I think also being willing to be self-critical in the sense that we need to be asking our communities, are you reinforcing gender inequities? Are you reinforcing stereotypes in the way that you yourselves mobilise? That's important, and that can only happen, of course, through direct engagement with our membership and with our base. Yeah. Sorry. Next questions.
Right. The next question is following on from Gulnara's point. What are some of the meaningful ways that Harmony Alliance will use to connect with members? Do you want to answer that, Gulnara?
In some sense, I feel that Maria has just done that in her previous response.
Yeah,
that was a very, very.
But Gulnara, when I think about the way, though, that you've also, through, say, the health literacy programs, through the interpreter programs, the way that we've actually also been able to bring that cross-sector dialogue, to bring many of the women who've often expressed to us that they're either not heard or their contributions are not acknowledged and recognised. And I want to say that I think there's a danger that sometimes, you know, visibility means inaction. It actually doesn't. It's the way our systems deny that visibility actively in many cases. So I think the work that the health literacy program has done, say with GPs, with other kind of institutional representatives, has been, in my view, really pioneering. And I hope I don't feel like we're all slapping each other on the back and saying how great are we, but that's the kind of work that I'm really hoping we progress, that we're able to speak directly to the judiciary and say, you're stereotyping when migrant women seek judicial redress, when migrant women are denied the human right to be able to understand and be understood in legal proceedings that have a major impact on their livelihoods, on their lives. The fact that we've been able to go to Chief Justices and say this directly to them, be part of training programs, be part of research programs that have happened, I think that's the sort of agenda that we want to maintain. And it's the sort of work that I know, you know, at that grassroots level that our Secretariat does all the time. I say that this at every meeting. The beauty of being a chair of this wonderful organisation is that I get to float in and do these wonderful sort of public appearances and then go home and think about, you know, all things social injustice. But the implementation of it truly has been our Secretariat, the engagement with our membership, our council. It's been largely the work that's been done all on a voluntary basis from our membership perspective. Extraordinary. But are there gaps? Are there things that we can do better? Absolutely. Should we ever become complacent? My goodness, no. Now more than ever, no.
Absolutely. And look, I think just to add to your excellent response to that, and you know, Mary, you're absolutely right. It is about the meaningful engagement. And I think from our point of view, it is about women, migrant and refugee women, seeing themselves in our work, in every work that we do. Because everything, every project, every program, every policy initiative that we get off the ground is really based on the needs of women, and that's the most important thing. And as long as women see that this is the direct connection to the needs, it's a needs-based response, whether it's in access to justice, as Maria said, or in health. Everything we do needs to be shaped around the experiences of migrant women and informed by them. And as long as we can maintain that as the key approach of the Alliance, I think we can say that we're achieving at least some form of meaningful engagement. That's the most important for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Marie, you touched on the health work that we are doing. So I'm going to take the question related to that. And both of you can probably answer that. Would you elaborate more on health literacy work and how refugee migrant women can benefit from this? And that is from an anonymous attendee.
I might just take that, Maria,
Yes, please.
quickly, and just to say that, look, this is something we started looking into about 2 years ago or so. We've done quite an extensive consultation on health literacy needs of migrant and refugee women, and it is no secret that many women who are new to Australia and who come from countries with healthcare systems that are vastly different to Australian healthcare system certainly have varying degrees of health literacy knowledge, and certainly usually very low levels of health system literacy knowledge, health system literacy around the Australian system. And as you would know, the Australian healthcare system is incredibly consumer driven. It requires a confident, informed consumer to navigate it well, which is not necessarily what many migrant and refugee women who are particularly new to Australia do well, just simply for those reasons of lacking some of those health literacy considerations. And look, another concern that we that came to light through the consultation process was the vast sort of array of health literacy information that is available, that is developed in various sectors, that is often fragmented, that can be questionable in terms of its authority or in terms of its credibility. It is not necessarily clear to someone who is new to Australia, for a migrant woman, whether they can trust certain advice that they find on the internet, whether it's an authoritative trusted source or whether it's something that should be avoided as health advice. So what we decided to do, and we worked, as I said, with the College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, is to develop a series of health literacy information pieces in an engaging format. So we're looking at a series of webinars translated into some languages, selected languages, that will be delivered by qualified practitioners and will be approved essentially by Australia's key women's health body, the College of ONG practitioners. So what we're essentially doing is we're achieving an appropriate format for communication, a multilingual format, but it's also a trusted and authoritative information that can be provided. We will be focusing on women's health, focusing on the life course from birth to essentially older age, and looking at the spectrum of women's health issues that will be covered in this information. Again, utilizing the technology, we're hoping to reach as many women as possible, and we hope to grow this project from there as well. Yes, look, I think that's probably as much as I can say on that, but we'll certainly be circulating more information to membership as we go. In the interest of time, Sana, would you like us to move to the next question?
Sounds good. So a couple of questions are actually suggestions. I'll just acknowledge that we have received those suggestions about having a Harmony Alliance media statement regarding racism, and also taking the UK legislation regarding racism into account. So we'll take those suggestions on board and have a look at those. And if there is anything further we need from you, we'll get in touch. There is another question from anonymous attendee, and that is, as a sister organization, how does the Harmony Alliance work with the other sister orgs, for example, AWAVA? How does AWAVA work in solidarity and advocate for the Harmony Alliance?
Well, look, again, I might just give a bit of an overview, and Sana, by all means, please add to that, because you work with your policy colleagues across the alliances as well. So we have, I suppose, a varying degree of collaboration with different alliances. There are 6 alliances in total. Some we work more closely with. I think AWAVA is used as an example for this question, and maybe it is a good example to sort of demonstrate how we work with the alliances. We actually work quite closely with AWAVA, and AWAVA stands for the Australian Women Against Violence Alliance. It's an alliance of services that support women who experience domestic and family violence. We have a long-standing collaboration around some of the key national policy issues. So, for example, the issue of women on temporary visas who are at risk of or experience family and domestic violence, and the services and supports response to that. There is a national working group that both Aweva and Harmony are represented on. Sana participates very actively in that process. We're also jointly participating in the National Dowry Abuse working group as well, and generally tend to work a lot on issues of family and domestic violence, whether it's by co-authoring submissions or co-drafting papers. You will see if you go through our website, there are quite a few submissions and reports that are co-branded with Aweva and Harmony, specifically relating to family and domestic violence issues, of course. We also have a bit of a sort of structural engagement in the way that, Harmony Alliance is represented on Aweva's advisory group, which is great. So we have that ongoing conduit of being able to contribute to Aweva's sort of directions. We can use probably another, example. Sana, do you want to mention the collaboration with the Rural Women's Alliance and the scholarships that?
Yeah, sure. That's something that I briefly touched on in my update earlier as well. So the National Rural Women's Coalition has this annual leadership program in which they bring a certain number of women to Canberra and have them learn about leadership skills, but also network with politicians in the Parliament House, and also so it's a 4-day leadership programs. And last year we collaborated with them, and so basically the collaboration was that we we had migrant and refugee women from our membership apply for the leadership program, and we supported them by providing financial help and scholarships, the travel scholarships to come to Canberra and attend their program. Because the leadership program by NRWC does not cover travel scholarships. So we pitched in with that and made it really, really easy for our members to attend. That is something, that we did with NRWC, but with other alliances as well, like with all the international work we have done. We have worked together with other alliances in developing the civil society report, the NGO coalition report on Beijing Plus 25 review, the blueprint for reform on in relation to temporary visas was also developed in close collaboration with the other alliances. So, and we have ongoing working groups that on specific issues that relate to migrant and refugee women, and we work very closely with the other alliances in those groups as well. I hope that answers the question. And with that, I'll also move on to the next question. And this is from Kate O'Sullivan. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Thanks for your great work with the Commonwealth on temporary visa holders who are victims of family violence. Your leadership with others on the issue is really valuable. How much are you working with states and territories on this issue? Do you have any thoughts on increasing work with states and territories in the coming year around temporary visa holders? So, I could give a brief answer to that, and then maybe you can add to that, Gulnara. We have had some direct meetings with the ACT Family Safety branch as well, so that because we are based in ACT, so that's where we have done that. But also there is now a National Council on Women's Safety, that brings all the women's safety ministers from all the states together. So we are trying to input into the meetings, but also through the National Advocacy Working Group on women experiencing violence and temporary visas. We are a part of that group, and as a part of that group, we are also looking at and have already done some campaigning, sending out letters to state ministers and all of that, and have received responses from state ministers as well. So we are a part of that work. That's not something we have done independently as Harmony Alliance, but it requires collaboration with people who are either members of our organization or other stakeholders in the group who are a member of the National Advocacy Group, who are based in those states and have the context and knowledge on the ground. So we are working with them.
Yeah, thanks, Sana. I think it's a fairly good overview. I suppose it's important to reflect on this issue because it's quite a complex issue, and we certainly prioritize it in our policy work as well, and work on many fronts with many organizations, many allies. The National Advocacy Group, which we're part, has been sort of established specifically for that reason, to reach out to members, to states and territories, to ensure the broader reach in terms of the advocacy. And there are various ways that it's done, whether through direct engagement with relevant state and territory ministers, or through some sort of broader policy development to input into the state and territory processes. There's been a bit of a combination of approaches but in particular, that National Advocacy Group has certainly been instrumental, and we have been a key part of that, and really supportive and engaging with our colleagues across Australia to make sure that we reach to as many states and territories as possible. We have been obviously focusing on the Commonwealth response as well, and working at the national level. It'll be interesting to see how the work around family safety or the focus might change given the changes with COAG and the National Cabinet. So I suppose we'll be very keen to see how this will unfold. I understand this is probably still in the process of determining how this will work. It was good to see the Prime Minister sort of prioritise the family safety as part of the National Cabinet, but we would certainly want to make sure that we don't lose any ground in terms of the understanding that we've managed to gain through various state and territory ministers on this issue. So it'll be an interesting change for us to watch and see how we adjust the national advocacy, and I'm sure the National Advocacy Group will be convening very soon to see how we can tackle this issue now that there is no COAG process.
All right. Do we want to take one more question before we wrap up, or do you think we should wrap up?
I just want to say very briefly that there've been a couple of comments, and I've been noting them, and there's an excellent comment around the regional settlement, and that I think is really important and relevant. And certainly, as I said, we don't know what our migration and settlement programs will look like, but given the recent focus on the regional settlement, I would imagine some of it will continue, and this is certainly something we're noting for our broader work. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that even if we're not able to touch upon these questions or comments, we're collating them, or we'll be taking them on board. So thank you very much for that.
Can I suggest, Sana, that given it's 3:27, and I know there are a number of people who need to grab kids, go back to work, do whatever it is that they're committed to doing. I did, however, can I ask you, because it would seem that when I'm on the screen I can't use the chat function, I don't know what my system is doing, but I note that Maria Osman has had to leave. I wanted to read out, perhaps in wrapping up, her comments about grieving for Black women, Black communities. Can somebody maybe make sure that we've given voice to that? Because as I say, she's had to leave and she's texted me saying she's got another commitment. But can we read it out?
Sure. I'm trying to find her comment.
Yeah, I think I see that given the recent events in the US, I'm grieving all Black women are grieving, and it's also re-triggering our experiences of racism. Supporting First Nations women is critical in the first step, but also supporting those of us who face racism based on skin color. Maybe supporting healing for women, reaching out to young women, supporting them with self-care and healing. Absolutely. I think she had an excellent suggestion around the statement that we support all women who face racism at this time and stand in solidarity, and how we can be an ally against racism. I think that's a very sensible suggestion.
And I think when we think about or reflect on the past, looking at the present, a bit of a stock take on those achievements, those excellent questions that participants have had around what does it look like moving forward. Clearly one of the priority areas has to be looking at anti-racism, and I think it's very important that we make that distinction between a non-sort of racist statement, we will not be racist, as opposed to a proactive and very, I think, informed position around an anti-racism commitment. I, as part of that, I also wanted to say that I know there's been a little bit of a discussion about All Lives Matter. We've been very clear about correcting that sort of terminology. I think it's important that when you say All Lives Matter, you're fundamentally silencing the campaign, and it is a campaign that Black Lives Matter. All lives can't matter until Black Lives Matter. And I again, I'm quoting people like Lydia Thorpe, who would say using the term All Lives Matter is not as harmless as you might think. It's been used as a tool to invalidate what the Black community has experienced, continues to experience, and the need to develop clear guidelines around recognition of our day-to-day tragic experiences is critical. So I think as part of that allyship, we really need to think about how inadvertently we might resort to these sorts of whitewashing, really, opportunities. Look, I am conscious of time, and it is important that we wrap up. Just the beginning. We don't see these webinars as the end of conversation and dialogue, but rather an opportunity to share some of those core areas of achievement. I am going to end again by going back to what I hope is a greater realisation of the resounding message of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And at a time when protests and vigils are happening around the world, are happening here in our own backyard, I want to go back to what June Oscar, AO, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, said yesterday or the day before in a speech when she was lamenting that we, you know, as Aboriginal women, we're saying this every day of our lives, and I quote, "We cannot let the hands of time tick endlessly towards a future that's defined by historical injustice and violently prejudicial conceptions of race. In 2020, let's embrace the potential of what we can truly become as a nation." We hope that with our sort of engagement with multicultural women, migrant refugee women, that we can become part of that conversation. Again, thank you. Thank you so much to our Secretariat. Gulnara, you're supposed to be on leave, but you've kindly come in to do this.
This is a much better way to spend time than leave. Can I just...
Thank you. Thank you to our wonderful council, our membership. We will certainly take on board all of the questions and comments that you've made. Keep them coming. Our survival really is dependent on how responsive and agile we are to the sort of environment and conversations that are happening out there. Go well all. We will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks, everyone.